When a single-dad janitor quietly offered his only breakfast to a trembling young soldier at dawn, he never imagined the truth hiding behind her frightened eyes, nor the dangerous secret she carried that could upend lives at the highest levels of the Navy. What began as an act of kindness became a turning point in all their destinies, and nothing that followed was predictable. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting healing stories about courage, compassion, and the unexpected miracles we meet in life's quiet moments. Your support helps us continue creating these meaningful journeys for you. The first light of morning barely touched the horizon when the storm rolled in over the small coastal town. Rain drifted like a gray curtain across the windows of Miller's diner, tapping steadily against the glass in a rhythm that felt both lonely and familiar. Kane Miller sat alone in his usual booth, third from the left, where he could see the parking lot, the road, and enough of the world to judge whether the day would be kind or cruel. Most days were somewhere in between. He loosened the worn green jacket he had patched more times than he cared to admit. It wasn't military issued, though people assumed it was. Kane never corrected them. He just nodded politely, grateful they didn't look close enough to see the frayed stitching or the faded fabric that spoke of years of blue-collar work rather than battlefields. This morning, however, was different. For the first time in months, Kane had allowed himself a rare indulgence, a proper breakfast, instead of the usual black coffee, and half-piece of toast he pretended was enough. Payday had come yesterday, and though most of it would go toward rent and Mila's school expenses, he still had a few dollars left. Enough for one decent meal. Enough to sit still for a moment. Enough to breathe. He lifted the sandwich toward his mouth, letting the warmth rise gently through the cold dampness that clung to the air. Then he heard the diner door open, and everything changed. Her boot struck the linoleum floor with a sharp, uneven rhythm, almost like she was forcing herself to stay standing. Kane glanced up without meaning to. It wasn't her uniform he noticed first, though the tan army jacket with its faded name patch RALT did catch his eye. It was the way she moved, shoulders tight, breath shallow, eyes scanning every corner of the room, as if danger hid inside the shadows. She was young, not a kid, but young enough that the weight in her eyes didn't belong on someone her age. She clutched a small camera in her hands, like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. Kane knew trauma when he saw it. He'd seen it in veterans and civilians, and sometimes in his own reflection. Whatever haunted her wasn't finished with her yet. She sank into the booth across from him, not because she chose that spot, Kane realized, but because her legs gave out. The waitress tried to approach her, but one look at the young soldier's trembling fingers and pale skin made her pause. Kane didn't mean to stare, but the human part of him, the father, the protector, wouldn't allow him to look away. Rain hammered harder against the windows, as if urging him to do something. The girl lifted the sandwich set in front of her hands, shaking so badly that half of it slipped from her grip. She stared at it like she couldn't remember what food was supposed to do. Kane exhaled slowly and made a choice. He slid out of his booth, walked over and sat down across from her, not intruding, but steady, calm, present. She didn't look up. Her breathing quickened. "Ma'am," Kane said softly, careful not to startle her. "You okay?" No response, just a small tremor across her lips, the kind that comes right before a person breaks. Without a word, Kane gently folded her fingers around her own sandwich. Her eyes finally rose to meet his wide, terrified searching for something she couldn't name. He didn't speak. He didn't push. He didn't ask. He simply held the sandwich steady and brought it toward her, slowly giving her every chance to refuse. She didn't. When she took the first bite, something inside her cracked. Tears filled her eyes, not dramatic, not loud, just the quiet kind, that told Kane she had been holding herself together for too long. The dining room around them faded. It was just the two of them, the rain, the storm, the trembling hands, and a moment of kindness so simple it felt sacred. He lowered his voice. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." Her breathing steadied, just enough to whisper, barely audible, "I haven't eaten since she stopped." Her throat closed around the words. Kane didn't need the rest. He simply nodded, understanding more than he let on. Her eyes drifted downward again, focusing on the old camera she guarded like a lifeline. Kane recognized the model, one of those vintage film cameras reporters used overseas, the kind that carried stories no one wanted to hear. Something had happened to her, something bad. But Kane knew better than to ask. The second bite came easier for her, the third even more so. The color began returning to her cheeks, though her shoulders stayed tense, as if ready to run. He pushed his own untouched breakfast toward her. She froze. "No, I can't." "Sure you can," Kane said gently. "I insist. You haven't eaten." "Yet," she whispered. Kane offered a soft smile, the type reserved for people who reminded him of storms he once survived. "I've eaten worse than hunger," he said. "Trust me. You need it more." The soldier looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him. Not at the worn jacket, or the tired eyes, or the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him like a silent shield. She looked at him with something else, recognition, gratitude, maybe even hope. "What's your name?" she asked. "Kane Miller." Her lips quivered. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I'm Tessa," she said quietly, almost as though she feared the name itself. Tessa Kane repeated, as if grounding her. "It's a strong name." Outside, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Inside, Tessa's hands finally stopped shaking. And in that fragile silence, broken only by the rain and the soft hum of the diner, something unexplainable happened. A connection. A shift. A flicker of fate neither of them understood. Kane didn't know she was running for her life. He didn't know what haunted her nights or chased her through the thin veil of dawn. And he certainly didn't know she was the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the United States Navy. All he knew was a young soldier was breaking quietly in front of him, and he would not let her face the darkness alone. Not today. Not while the storm raged at dawn. The rain had settled into a steady downpour by the time the breakfast crowd began trickling into the diner. Boots scraped across the floor, jackets dripped water onto the checkered tiles, and conversations hummed quietly beneath the clatter of dishes. But at Kane's booth, everything felt muted, like the world outside had blurred around the edges, unwilling to intrude on the fragile peace hanging between him and the shaken soldier across from him. Tessa Ralt sat with her back pressed against the vinyl seat, eyes darting toward the windows every few seconds. It wasn't the casual glance of someone checking the weather. It was sharper, quicker, the kind born from instinct and fear. She was trained, that much was obvious, but whatever she was running from had taught her something else too. Survival didn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looked like a trembling breath. Kane studied her quietly. He had no rank to his name anymore. No uniform, no authority. Just a janitor's wages, and the eyes of a man who had seen enough brokenness to recognize it instantly. He didn't pry. He didn't push. But he watched the way her hand never left the old camera, her thumb brushing repeatedly over a dented corner, as if memorizing its edges kept her anchored. "You sure you're all right?" he asked gently. Tessa swallowed hard before forcing out a whisper. I don't know. Not exactly an answer, but Kane understood. Sometimes the truth was too heavy to carry in full. Her sandwich sat half-finished. His untouched plate had become hers. And though she eyed, her gaze flickered constantly from the door, to the window, to the older couple 2 booths down, then back again, as if she expected danger to step out from behind a ketchup bottle. Kane spoke softly. "No one here wants anything from you, Tessa. This is a safe place." Her eyes met his, and for a moment he saw it. Whatever she had endured, whatever had chased her into this morning, it had carved itself deep. Terror lived in the quiet spaces between her breaths. "Safe," she repeated, but the word didn't land. It floated lost. Kane leaned forward, slightly lowering his voice to a tone that carried warmth, but also certainty. "I've been where you are. Different road, same storm. You're not alone." Tessa's jaw tightened. "You don't know that." "No," Kane admitted. "But I know what it looks like when someone's been fighting a battle long after everyone else thinks it's over." To his surprise, her eyes softened, not in trust yet, but in weary acknowledgement. She looked down at her hands and whispered, "I can't go back." Back where she froze, her breath hitched, and then she shook her head sharply. "If I say it out loud, it becomes real." The waitress approached with a fresh pot of coffee. Tessa stiffened instantly. Shoulders, rising posture, rigid fingers gripping the camera like a weapon. The waitress paused, Kisor reading the tension correctly, and gave a gentle smile. "Coffee for either of you." Kane read the panic in Tessa's eyes and answered quickly. "Just a refill for me, Mary. Thanks." Mary nodded and moved on. Tessa's shoulders slowly lowered, but the tremor didn't stop. Kane kept his tone steady. "Tessa, whoever or whatever is chasing you, you don't have to explain it today. Not to me. Not to anyone." Her eyes glistened, not from tears, but from exhaustion so deep it felt like a shadow. "I haven't slept," she whispered. "Not really. Every time I close my eyes, I see—" She stopped again, squeezing her eyes shut as if trying to erase whatever image haunted her. Kane waited. Silence was sometimes the best lifeline. When she opened her eyes again, a question slipped out, raw and trembling. "Why are you being kind to me?" Kane blinked, taken aback. "Shouldn't I be? You don't know me. Doesn't mean you don't deserve kindness." She shook her head. "People don't just help for no reason." Kane offered a small, sad smile. "Then maybe you've been around the wrong people." Tessa looked down at her hands again. A small scar traced across her knuckle, fresh, red, jagged. Kane recognized the type. Defensive wound. Something, or someone, had cornered her recently. She caught him noticing and pulled her hand back instinctively. "It's nothing," she murmured. Kane didn't argue, but the knot in his chest tightened. Outside, the storm shifted direction, sending sheets of rain sliding down the tall windows. Tessa's gaze snapped to the sound, her entire body flinching before she forced herself still. "Whoever hurt you," Kane said softly, "they're not here." Tessa pressed her palm against the camera again, fingers trembling. "I can't lose this. Why, what's on it?" Her breath hitched. The fear in her eyes went from scattered to sharp, focused. "It's the only proof I have," she whispered. "If they find me, they'll take it. And then none of it will matter." Before Kane could ask more, the diner door opened again. A gust of cold air swept through, carrying the sharp scent of wet asphalt. Tessa tensed instantly, like a wire pulled too tight. A man entered, just an ordinary customer, shaking rain from his jacket. But Tessa's reaction was instant and severe. She pushed back into the corner of the booth chest, rising and falling too quickly. Kane moved without thinking, slow, controlled, placing himself just slightly between her and the door. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to make her feel shielded. Tessa's breathing eased by a fraction. The man walked past them toward the counter, oblivious, and the moment passed. But in its wake, Tessa's vulnerability lingered in the air like smoke. "Kane," she whispered, "if they find me, I don't know what they'll do." He held her gaze steady, warm, unflinching. "They won't," he said. "Not today. Not while I'm here." Her eyes welled again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was relief, fragile and hesitant, but real. And maybe Kane thought that was the first step toward healing. Neither of them knew it yet, but this quiet, rain-soaked morning would become the turning point of both their lives. The moment when a janitor with a bruised past and a soldier with a shattered present found strength in each other's presence. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, something else began. A fragile bond, a glimmer of trust, and the silent terror of a soldier finally finding a place where she didn't have to run. Not yet. Not here. Not with him. For the next few minutes, the diner felt suspended in a quiet that didn't belong to a stormy morning. Tessa sat across from Kane, her posture still tight, but her breathing no longer as fragile as fractured glass. The warmth from the food seemed to ground her a little, though her fingers still wrapped around the camera like a lifeline. Kane didn't touch his own plate. He knew better than to disturb a moment that was still trying to find its shape. But healing, even the smallest kind, is delicate, easily broken. The door chimed again as someone entered. Just a pair of teenagers laughing at their phones, but Tessa jumped as though a gunshot had gone off. The sound of her breath catching felt louder than the rain outside. She muttered something too soft to hear and slid out of the booth. Kane stood instantly. "Tessa, hold on." But she stepped back, shaking her head, her eyes unfocused. Fear had retaken its grip stronger than before. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I shouldn't have stayed this long." "Tessa, I'm sorry." And then she moved toward the door, fast, unsteady, like someone fleeing a burning building rather than a warm diner. Kane reached to follow, but something in her expression stopped him. It wasn't rejection. It wasn't distrust. It was a silent plea. "Don't follow me. I don't want you hurt." The door swung shut behind her. A cold gust of wind rushed in, scattering napkins along the counter before the glass settled again. And she was gone. Not walking across the lot. Not heading down the street. She disappeared into the storm, as if the rain itself had swallowed her whole. Kane remained standing for several seconds, watching the space where she had been. Something inside him tightened. Not fear, not confusion, but a deeper ache he recognized all too well. The fear of leaving someone behind who clearly needed help. Mary, the waitress, approached quietly. "She okay?" Kane didn't answer right away. He watched the rain slashing sideways across the windows, forming shifting shadows that made it impossible to see beyond the parking lot. "I don't know," he finally said. Mary sighed sympathetically. Sweet girl. Looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Or eaten in one, Kane thought. He thanked Mary, left money for the breakfast he barely touched, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit instantly sharp and invasive. Rain soaked through his jacket within seconds, but he didn't care. He scanned the street, the sidewalk, the alleys. Nothing. Only the hum of a distant truck and the endless shiver of the storm. "Tessa," he called once, not loudly, but in the way a father calls into the dark for something he hopes isn't gone forever. No answer. He searched for 5 more minutes, but logic eventually intervened. Whatever she was running from, she'd learned how to stay hidden. She wouldn't walk along open streets. She wouldn't let herself be seen, and she certainly wouldn't come back until she felt safe again. Kane stood there in the rain, still quiet, absorbing the weight of his own helplessness. Then slowly, he breathed out. "All right," he murmured to himself. "I won't chase you, but I won't forget you." He didn't know why the promise formed so naturally. Maybe because she reminded him of storms he once survived. Maybe because the soldier in her eyes was begging for someone to stay, even when she couldn't ask for it out loud. Or maybe because kindness wasn't something he gave lightly, but once he did, he meant it. The next morning, Kane returned to the diner before sunrise, and the morning after that, and the one after that. Every day he sat in the same booth, the third from the left, with a cup of black coffee and an untouched plate. He pushed around for an hour before leaving for work. The staff didn't question it. Mary brought refills quietly, offering him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder when she passed. To anyone else, he looked like a man nursing routine. But inside, Kane watched the door every time it opened. He checked the windows whenever headlights flashed. He listened for boots that didn't match the rhythm of regular customers. He wasn't obsessed. He wasn't delusional. He was simply waiting. Because people like Tessa didn't come into your life for no reason, and people with eyes that broken didn't heal alone. Mila noticed, of course. One evening, as he picked her up from school, she climbed into the truck and studied his face, the same way she studied puzzles carefully, attentively not missing the corners. "Daddy?" she asked. "Did something happen at work?" "No, sweetheart." You sure Kane forced a smile. "Just thinking." About who he froze for a split second. Mila didn't miss it. She poked his arm gently. "Daddy, sometimes when you look out the window, you look like you're waiting for someone." "You okay?" His heart softened. 9 years old, and somehow she always saw through him. "I'm fine, honey. Just hoping someone's okay." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "A friend," he nodded. Mila considered this, swinging her legs slightly. "Well, sometimes people come back when they're ready." The words, simple as they were, hit him with unexpected clarity. Maybe Tessa would come back. Maybe she wouldn't. But he would be here ready. That was enough. On the 7th morning, something changed. Kane walked into the diner, nodded to Mary, and settled into his booth. He placed his hands around the warm coffee mug, letting the heat seep into fingers chilled by early dawn. He looked at the door the way he always did. But this time, instead of hope, he felt unease. A strange crawling tension beneath his ribs, as if the air itself was waiting for something. He stayed longer than normal, 2 hours instead of 1, before finally heading to the industrial building where he worked as a janitor. He moved through hallways, sweeping and mopping, but his mind wasn't present. He kept replaying the moment Tessa's eyes met his before she vanished. The fear. The apology. Her shadow lingered with him all day. By the time he drove home that evening, the sun was setting in orange streaks across the sky. Mila greeted him at the door, chattering about her school art project. He listened, smiled, helped her with dinner. But something gnawed at him, deep unsettling. Wrong. Later that night, when the house was quiet and Mila slept peacefully, Kane stepped onto the porch. The air was still heavy, too quiet for his liking. He looked down the street. Empty. He looked at the alley. Still. He looked at the corner. A figure moved. A shadow. Brief. Unmistakable. Someone was out there. Watching. Waiting. And Kane's heart dropped as he realized Tessa hadn't just vanished. Something else had found her first. Something dangerous. Something that was now coming his way. The following morning began like any other, but Kane felt the shift before he opened his eyes. The world had a strange quiet to it. Too still for a Tuesday, too heavy for an ordinary dawn. He brewed coffee, packed Mila's lunch, and walked her to the truck as sunlight crept softly across the driveway. Mila jumped inside, humming a tune she had invented, but Kane paused before getting behind the wheel. A prickling sensation crawled along the back of his neck. Someone had been watching the house last night. He hadn't imagined it. He knew the difference between paranoia and instinct, and his instincts, once razor-sharp from a life he rarely talked about, had never lied to him. Daddy Mela called from inside. We're gonna be late." He forced a reassuring smile, climbed in, and drove her to school. He waited until she walked through the doors before pulling away slower than usual, checking his mirrors more often than he liked. Nothing unusual behind him. No shadows slipping between cars. No headlights lingering longer than they should. But the unease stayed thick as fog. After work, he returned home earlier than planned. He wanted to check the locks, walk the yard, make sure nothing had been disturbed. Rain from the previous night had left the soil soft, but when he scanned the ground, he saw nothing unusual. No footprints, no tire marks in the mud. Maybe he'd overreacted. The thought died the moment he heard the low, controlled hum of an engine approaching. Not fast, not reckless, purposeful. Kane stepped off the porch, eyes narrowing at the long stretch of road leading to his small house. A black military-grade SUV turned the corner. Not the kind tourists rented, not the kind civilians drove. This one belonged on bases and restricted zones. The SUV stopped exactly in front of his house, not 1 inch too far, not 1 inch too close. Kane didn't move. The passenger door opened first. A woman stepped out, tall, steady, mid-30s, with the unmistakable presence of someone who carried both authority and empathy. Her uniform was pressed, her boots polished, her posture sharp, but not aggressive. Kira Ross. He didn't know her name yet, but her demeanor told him everything important. She wasn't here by accident. Then the rear door opened. Another officer stepped out, a man this time, older, with graying hair and eyes that had seen more battlefields than most people could imagine. He wore the insignia of someone high enough in rank that his very presence felt like a shift in gravity. But Kira was the one who approached him. "Mr. Kane Miller?" she asked. Kane's jaw tightened. "Who's asking?" Kira's eyes softened not with pity, but with respect. "Lieutenant Kira Ross, Naval Command. We need to speak with you." Two things hit Kane at once. She wasn't surprised by the caution in his voice, and she wasn't giving him an option about what Kane asked. Kira exchanged a glance with the older officer. He gave a silent nod. "It's regarding a soldier," she said gently. "Tessa Ralt." Kane's heartbeat froze midair. His voice came out lower than he intended. "What about her?" "She's missing," Kira replied. "And you may be the last civilian who saw her before she disappeared." The world shifted, not dramatically, just enough that the ground felt slightly uneven under his boots. The older officer finally stepped forward. He studied Kane the way commanders study men they're trying to decide if they can trust. "I'm Admiral Marcus Ralt," he said. Kane blinked. Ralt. The name hit him like a jolt. Tessa's last name, her father, Admiral, high-ranking, decorated, respected, and carrying the hollowed-out look of a man whose daughter was missing. Kane lowered his voice. "Sir." Marcus didn't return the greeting traditionally. Instead, he looked at Kane, as if searching for something beneath his surface, truth, character, maybe even hope. "We believe Tessa contacted you," Marcus said. "Or at least, she trusted you enough to seek shelter nearby." Kane swallowed. "She came into a diner. She looked shaken. I bought her breakfast. She left before I could—" He stopped, guilt threading through his voice. Kira stepped closer. "Mr. Miller, Tessa rarely trusts anyone, but she spoke your name." Kane's breath caught. "She did?" he asked quietly. And Marcus answered. "Not many people can reach her when she goes into survival mode, but you did, and that makes you important to us." Kane glanced at the black SUV again. "Why are you here? Why me?" Kira answered this time. "Tessa left her unit during a covert retrieval mission. Something went wrong. We believe she was targeted afterward, possibly by someone inside our own ranks." Kane's jaw clenched. She was terrified. I could see it. Marcus nodded grimly. "She has evidence proof of what happened. That camera she carries holds everything." Kane felt his pulse hammering. He remembered how tightly she clung to it, the way her fingers trembled around it, the fear in her eyes every time the diner door opened. And suddenly, her disappearance didn't feel like a choice. She ran, Kira said softly, because she didn't know who to trust. But she trusted you, Marcus added. She said your name, twice. Kane's throat tightened. He didn't know how to respond, because nothing in his life prepared him for this standing on his front lawn, while an admiral and a lieutenant told him he was the last lifeline to a soldier he barely knew but couldn't stop thinking about. "What do you need from me?" he finally asked. Kira exchanged a glance with Marcus. "We need your help to find her," she said. "We think she left clues without realizing it. Things she said, places she mentioned. Details that may not mean anything to us, but might mean something to you," Marcus finished. Kane hesitated only long enough to think of Mila. Kira read his silence. "Your daughter will be protected." "This isn't a forceful request, Mr. Miller. But it is urgent." Kane exhaled slowly. He thought of the trembling soldier holding a camera like a shield. He thought of the apology in her eyes. He thought of the shadow moving near his home last night. He knew the answer before they asked. "I'll help," he said. Marcus nodded, once a gesture of respect, rarely given lightly. "Good. Then let's go." As Kane stepped toward the SUV, he glanced back at his house. It felt smaller than usual, more vulnerable, as if leaving it behind meant stepping into a world he had hoped he'd never see again. The storm clouds gathered overhead heavy and restless as he followed the officers. Kira opened the door for him. "Mr. Miller," she said gently, "whatever you saw in Tessa, we saw it too once." Kane paused, hand on the frame. "And what was that?" he asked. Kira's expression softened. A soul worth saving. The SUV door closed behind him, and the search for Tessa truly began. The black SUV rumbled through the gates of Naval Command with the slow, deliberate weight of something carrying more than passengers, carrying secrets. Kane sat in the back seat beside Kira Ross, his hands resting on his knees, steady, but not relaxed. The closer they drove toward the heart of the base, the more he felt like he was stepping into a world long sealed off from men like him. A single dad, a janitor, a man who had walked away from uniforms and chain of command years ago. But today, fate had dragged him back into its orbit. Marcus Ralt sat in the front passenger seat, silent, staring ahead, as if the horizon itself owed him answers. Even without speaking, the Admiral radiated the controlled intensity of a man balancing duty and fatherhood on the same blade. Kane recognized the look. He'd worn it once, right before his life changed forever. As the SUV parked, Kira opened her door and motioned for him to follow. "Stay close," she said. "You're a civilian here, but you're not a suspect. They just need you." Kane gave a brief nod, though the knot in his stomach contradicted him. Inside the command building, officers moved with purpose, papers in hand, radios clipped to uniforms, footsteps echoing down polished floors. But Kane felt something else beneath the bustle tension. Worry. An undercurrent of fear only people trained for crisis could sense. Tessa's disappearance wasn't a small matter. It was a storm building behind closed doors. Marcus led them into a secure briefing room. Maps were pinned to the walls, red markers circling specific areas around the coastline. A projector displayed a paused frame of a blurry image, likely pulled from security footage. But what caught Kane's eye wasn't the room. It was a photograph on the table. Tessa, smiling, standing beside Marcus during what looked like a Navy commissioning ceremony. She looked so different from the trembling young woman who had clutched a camera while rain hammered the diner windows. Marcus followed Kane's gaze, his voice softening just slightly. "That was before she deployed," he said. before everything changed. Kane swallowed. What happened to her? Marcus took a long breath before answering. Tessa was assigned to a classified retrieval mission overseas. Her team's objective was to recover sensitive intelligence that compromised certain officers. His jaw tightened. The mission succeeded. But someone on the inside tried to silence her afterward. Permanently. Kira stepped closer, adding she managed to escape with the key evidence. That camera she carries, it's not just sentimental. It's everything. Kane remembered the way she held it. White-knuckled, desperate, terrified someone would rip it from her hands. She wouldn't tell me anything, he murmured. She couldn't, Marcus replied. Not until she found someone she felt safe with. And she said your name, Kira added softly. Twice. The words hit Kane with unexpected force. He wasn't sure he deserved that trust. Not from someone so wounded. Then the door opened. A tall, rigid officer in a sharp uniform stepped inside. His eyes were cold, calculating, too polished, too perfect. Kane didn't know him, but everything about the man felt wrong. Trent Walden, Admiral Trent said, nodding stiffly. We're continuing the search, but there's still no visual on Ralt. Marcus gave no sign of emotion. Any new intel? Not yet, Trent said. Then his gaze slid toward Kane with a subtle, probing intensity. But I understand we brought in outside involvement. Kira stiffened slightly beside Kane. Marcus's voice dropped into the tone of an admiral accustomed to absolute command. Mr. Kane Miller is here because he is crucial to this investigation. Trent's eyebrow lifted. A janitor Kane didn't flinch, but something inside him hardened. A man my daughter trusted, Marcus said firmly. And that carries more weight than your opinion of his job. Trent's jaw shifted just enough to reveal irritation before he masked it. Kira stepped forward. Mr. Miller might remember details Tessa shared with him, details she didn't know were important. Trent's gaze flickered, or he could be withholding information. Kane met his stare without blinking. I'm not hiding anything. Trent took a step closer, invading his space. Then you won't mind answering a few questions. Before he could continue, Marcus stepped between them with the quiet authority of a man who didn't need volume to dominate a room. Lieutenant Walden Marcus said calmly, Mr. Miller is here to help, not to be interrogated like a suspect. Kira folded her arms. Unless you believe he had something to do with what happened to Tessa. Kane saw it, a flicker in Trent's eyes. Too sharp, too fast. The kind of flicker that belonged to someone hiding something, not someone searching for the truth. But it vanished in an instant. No, Trent said smoothly. Of course not. Just doing my job. Marcus turned away, signaling the discussion was over. But Kane couldn't shake the feeling that Trent's interest in him had nothing to do with protocol, or maybe everything. Marcus gestured toward the chair beside him. Mr. Miller, he said, please tell us everything. Every word she said. Every detail, no matter how small. Kane recounted the encounter, the trembling, the camera, the way she scanned the room, the half-sentences, the apology in her eyes. He described the exact booth, the exact tone of her voice, the exact moment she fled. When he finished, Marcus sat in silence for several long seconds. She wasn't just running, Marcus said. She was leaving breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs, Kane asked. Kira nodded. Survivors do it without realizing. They mention places, objects, patterns they cling to, familiar spots where they might return. She mentioned the old pier, Kane said suddenly. Marcus's eyes sharpened. The pier. She didn't say much, Kane admitted. Just that she used to go there when things got too loud. Marcus inhaled slowly, purposefully. She's reaching out, he said. Trying to be found. Trying to trust the right person. Kira looked at Kane with quiet certainty. And right now, that person is you. Kane didn't know how or why, but he knew one thing. Whatever storm Tessa was trapped in, he was now part of it. And he wasn't leaving until he brought her out. Alive. The briefing room felt smaller the longer Kane stayed inside it. The stale air, the buzzing fluorescent lights, the maps littered with red markers. It all pressed in on him, tightening around his ribs like a slow vice. He wasn't used to being back in military walls, even as a civilian. Too many memories lived in silences like these. Marcus Ralt stood at the head of the table, studying a list of locations where search teams had already looked. His jaw flexed as he read the expression of a father trying to remain an admiral. Duty, pulling one way, fear, pulling the other. Kira Ross leaned over a second map, marking possible routes with blue ink. She worked methodically, every line drawn with intention, as if she could coax Tessa's location out of the paper through sheer determination. Trent Walden, however, didn't hide his impatience. He paced the length of the room with stiff, clipped strides, watching Kane with a glance that lingered a second too long each time, the kind of stare that evaluated a threat where none existed. Kane felt the weight of it, but refused to look away. Finally, Trent stopped pacing, stopped pretending. He folded his arms, his voice sharp enough to cut through the silence. "I still don't understand," Trent said, "why we're basing an entire search operation on the word of a man who barely knows Tessa Ralt." Kira looked up immediately. Her eyes flashed. "Enough, Walden." "No," Trent snapped. "I've been patient. But this," he pointed at Kane as if pointing out a stain. "This is a civilian with no clearance, no training, no service record." Kane's chest tightened. He didn't react, but Kira did. "That's none of your business," she said coldly. Trent ignored her. "Admiral, with all due respect, we're chasing ghosts. For all we know, he might have helped her disappear." Marcus lifted his head slowly, dangerously. "Watch your tone." Trent gave a stiff nod, but the venom didn't leave his eyes. "I'm simply being thorough. Tessa is missing. She was carrying classified information." Now suddenly, a janitor is the last man she spoke to. Kane's jaw tightened. He hated how the word janitor sounded in Trent's mouth. A dismissal, a verdict. "Mr. Miller," Trent said, stepping closer, "why don't you explain again why Tessa trusted you? Why she ran to you and not to trained personnel?" Kane held his gaze unblinking. "Because she was scared." "That's not an explanation. It's the only one that matters." "Oh, really?" Trent smirked. "Convenient." Kira slammed her marker down. "Walden, that's enough." "No, Lieutenant, it's not." Trent turned back to Marcus. "We can't blindly assume he's telling the truth. What if he's working with whoever's after her? What if he's the reason she's missing?" A quiet filled the room, heavy electric. Kane didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. But something inside him, something dormant, stirred awake. Marcus stepped forward, his voice deceptively calm. "Lieutenant Walden, you're out of line." "Sir, out. Of. Line." Trent clenched his jaw, but pride held him in place. Marcus turned to Kane. "You are not under suspicion. You understand me?" "Yes, sir," Kane said. But Trent wasn't finished. His eyes dropped to the file in his hand. A file with Kane's name on it. He began reading aloud. Kane Miller, 38, single parent, civilian maintenance worker, former candidate for... Kira moved so fast it startled even Kane. She ripped the folder out of Trent's hands. "That's classified," she hissed. "And irrelevant." Trent stepped back with a mocking smile. "So he does have a past." Kane kept his voice even. "Everyone does. Some more interesting than others," Trent said, eyes narrowing. "Tell me, Mr. Miller, why did you leave your program early? Wash out?" Or something else. Kira stepped between them before Kane could answer. "You're done here, Lieutenant." But Trent leaned sideways, eyes locked on Kane. "You know something," he whispered, barely audible. "I can see it." And I'm going to find out what." The threat lingered in the air even after Trent left the room. The door slammed behind him. Silence returned. Marcus exhaled slowly. "I apologize, Mr. Miller. Walden can be aggressive." Kira scoffed. "He's a vulture." Kane said nothing. He didn't need to. The exchange had revealed something important. Trent wasn't just suspicious. He was rattled. Rattled men made mistakes. And Kane would remember every one of them. Marcus stepped toward Kane, the sternness fading just enough to reveal the father beneath the uniform. "I need you to look at something." He picked up Tessa's photo again, her bright smile, her service uniform, the shine in her eyes that no longer existed. "My daughter trusted almost no one. But when she fled, she said your name." Kane felt that truth land inside him like a stone dropped into deep water. Marcus continued, voice thick. "That means something. Maybe more than we understand." Kira touched Kane's arm lightly, steady, reassuring. "We don't believe Walden's accusations. Tessa's instinct for people was uncanny. And she chose you." Kane finally spoke. "What exactly do you need from me now?" Marcus exchanged a look with Kira before answering. "We need what you noticed," Kira said. Things she said between breaths. Places she looked at. Words she repeated. Trauma can hide messages in panic. Marcus nodded. And she was in panic. Kane closed his eyes, briefly replaying the scene in the diner. The trembling hands. The camera. Her shoulders tightening each time the door opened. She kept glancing east. Kane said finally. Kira looked up. East. At the windows facing the coastline, she was afraid of something coming from the water. Marcus stiffened. The pier. Kane nodded. She said it used to be her quiet place, the only place she felt she could breathe. Marcus's voice lowered. Then that's where she wants us to look. Before Kane could respond, the lights flickered once, then twice. A power surge. Then a voice crackled over the intercom. "All officers report to Sector B. Repeat Sector B immediately." Marcus's face changed, sharpening, focusing. Kira grabbed her tablet. "Sector B is surveillance. Something just tripped the perimeter sensors." Marcus looked at Kane. "Stay close." Kane followed them out of the room, heart pounding, not from fear, but from certainty. Something had shifted. Something had been found. Or someone. And Kane prayed with every step that it was Tessa, and not the men hunting her. The hallway outside the briefing room erupted into motion the moment the intercom cut out. Boots thundered against the polished floor. Radios crackled with clipped orders. Officers filed toward Sector B with the precision of a force trained to respond within seconds. But beneath the sharp rhythm of urgency, Kane sensed something else. Fear. Contained, disciplined, but unmistakably present. Marcus Ralt moved quickly, his strides long and controlled. Kira Ross followed beside him, already scanning her tablet for the triggered sensor data. Kane kept pace behind them, careful not to obstruct the officers racing past. As they rounded the corner, alarms pulsed through the corridor, low, steady, designed to alert without inducing panic. A pair of Marines stood ready outside the surveillance suite. Admiral, one of them, barked, stepping aside immediately. Inside, blue screens flickered across the walls, each displaying a different camera angle across the base perimeter. Gates, shorelines, restricted docks, access roads. A specialist typed rapidly at the main console as Marcus approached. "What tripped it?" Marcus demanded. "Motion detector near the east fence, sir," the specialist replied. But it wasn't a breach. Someone was watching the base, then disappeared before the cameras could catch a full visual. Marcus's expression hardened. "Show me." Footage rewound. Frame by frame, a shadow emerged near the chain-link fence, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like a rain-soaked jacket. The figure stood in the blind spot just long enough to avoid a clear capture, then turned away. Kane leaned closer. "Is that?" "No," Kira whispered. "Too big." "Tessa's barely 5'6". Marcus's voice dropped to a growl. "Zoom." The specialist complied. The image was grainy, distorted by distance and fog, but one detail became chillingly clear. The man wasn't watching the base. He was watching the road leading to the base, waiting. Kane's stomach tightened, waiting for someone. Marcus nodded grimly. Or hunting. Before anyone could respond, the door behind them opened sharply. Trent Walden strode in. His eyes flicked to the screen, then to Marcus, then to Kane. "Looks like your civilian friend picked up a tail," Trent said. Kira bristled. "This has nothing to do with Kane." "Oh, really?" Trent raised an eyebrow. "A soldier goes missing. The last person she sees is him. And now someone's watching the base right after he arrives." Coincidence Kane spoke before she could. "You're reaching." "Am I?" Trent stepped closer. "Or is there something you're not telling us?" Marcus intervened, voice sharp. "Lieutenant." "Enough." But Trent didn't back down. He turned to the specialist. "Run the facial recognition." "Already did," the specialist replied. "No match. Masked signature." Trent's jaw tightened. Not the answer he wanted. Kira crossed her arms. "So it's someone who knows how to hide." "Someone trained," Marcus added. Kane's voice lowered. "Someone like the men who were after Tessa." Marcus exchanged a tense look with Kira. "Exactly." Trent's eyes narrowed. "You seem awfully sure about that, Mr. Miller." Kane stared back. I saw the fear in her eyes. "And that makes you an expert," Trent scoffed. "No," Kane said calmly. "But it makes me someone who paid attention." That stopped Trent just for a fraction of a second, enough to reveal frustration or guilt. Marcus returned his attention to the footage. "We need boots on the ground. Sweep the area around the east fence. Quietly. If someone's scouting the base, we don't want to tip our hand." Kira nodded. "I'll lead the team." Trent opened his mouth, but Marcus cut him off. "You'll stay here." Trent's nostrils flared. "Sir, that's an order." Kira smirked the tiniest bit as she passed him. Trent remained behind, stiff, furious, restrained only by the uniform on his shoulders. As they exited the surveillance suite, Kane followed Marcus and Kira toward the motor pool. He hesitated. Kira Kane said quietly, "That man, watching the fence. He was waiting for something. Or someone." Kira nodded. "I know. He wasn't watching the base." Her eyes lifted. "No, he was watching the road I came through." Kira stopped walking. A slow, cold understanding passed through her expression. "You think," she said, "carefully he followed you." Kane's voice remained steady. "If they found her camera, if they know she trusted me." Kira's breath caught. "They might think she came to me again." She didn't argue. She didn't deny. Instead, she whispered, "Then we need to find her before they do." The drive to the east perimeter was tense and silent. Rain had started again, light but relentless tapping against the windshield like impatient fingers. Kira drove Marcus Road shotgun, and Kane sat in the back, watching the coastline blur past in shades of gray. The old pier came into view. Weathered wood, rusted rails, the ghost of a place that once held laughter and sunlight. Now it looked like a refuge for someone running from a world too sharp to bear. Kira parked several yards away. "We move slow," she murmured. "If she's here, she'll bolt if she feels cornered." Marcus nodded. "Kane, stay behind me." "Understood." They approached the pier with quiet footsteps. The wind carried faint echoes, waves hitting the supports below. Gulls calling in the distance, the soft groan of aging wood shifting beneath the weather. Kira raised her hand, stopped, pointed. Near the far end of the pier, Something small glinted faintly. Kane felt his heart lurch. Tessa's camera strap, he whispered. It was wedged between two planks, as if ripped during a struggle or torn loose by someone stumbling in desperation. Kira crouched. Fresh. Marcus scanned the surroundings, posture rigid. If she was here, she could still be close. Or, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Kane's voice was low. She didn't leave that by choice. A rustling sound emerged from beneath the pier. Kira's hand moved to her sidearm. Someone's down there. Kane stepped forward before he thought twice. Tessa, he called softly. Silence. Then a faint, broken whimper. Marcus exhaled sharply. It's her. Kane leaned over the rail, heart hammering. The shadow beneath the pier shifted. A small hand appeared, trembling, gripping the support beam. Kira moved fast, descending the stairs toward the lower platform. Marcus followed, and Kane went last, his pulse pounding. When they reached the bottom, they saw her. Tessa, curled beneath the beams, clothes soaked, skin pale, eyes wide with terror. She clutched the broken camera body against her chest, like it was all she had left of the world. The moment she saw Kane, her breath shattered into sobs. I tried to run, she whispered. But they found me. I didn't know where else to go. Kane knelt beside her, voice soft, but fierce with reassurance. You're safe now. I'm here. She collapsed into his arms, broken, exhausted but alive. Behind them, the storm gathered again. And somewhere in the distance, hidden in the gray curtain of rain, someone was watching. The wind howled beneath the pier, carrying the briny scent of the ocean as waves crashed against the wooden supports. But none of that mattered, because all Kane saw, all he could see, was Tessa trembling in his arms. Her breathing came in shallow, broken bursts, her fingers gripping his jacket, as though she feared he might disappear if she blinked. Her clothes were soaked, her hair plastered against her forehead, and mud streaked across her cheek. But it was her eyes' wild, terrified hollow that punched straight into Kane's chest. Tessa, he whispered, steady and warm, even as adrenaline pounded through him. You're safe now. You don't have to run anymore. She shook her head violently. No. No, I can't. They're close. I heard them on the pier. They're hunting me. They'll kill me if they find me. Marcus and Kira reached the lower platform seconds later. The sight of Tessa, half-conscious, clutching the shattered remains of her camera, made Marcus flinch as if struck. Tess. Marcus's voice cracked the sound of a father forcing steel into his words. Sweetheart, it's Dad. You're okay. We're here. Tessa's gaze flickered to him, but the terror didn't leave. Kane. She whispered, her voice thin as rain. Don't let them take it. She pressed the broken camera against his chest. Kane steadied her hands, feeling the tremor travel through her entire body. I won't, he promised. Whatever's on this, it stays protected. Marcus knelt beside them, eyes burning. Tess, who did this? Who followed you? But Tessa couldn't answer. Her head dropped against Kane's shoulder, breath shaking her strength, collapsing. Kira crouched beside them gently, checking Tessa's pulse, her voice soft but focused. She's dehydrated, exhausted, running on adrenaline for too long. Kane shifted to support her more securely. She needs medical help. Kira nodded, pulling her radio to call in support. But Kane's instincts screamed. He caught Kira's wrist before she pressed the button. No radio, he said sharply. Kira blinked. Why, because whoever's after her is inside the system, Kane replied. Tessa's terrified of them tracking her. A radio ping might alert the wrong people. It wasn't paranoia, it was clarity. Trauma sharpened truth. Marcus inhaled deeply. He's right. Kira hesitated only a second, then tucked the radio back. Thunder rumbled overhead. Tessa stirred again, her voice barely a breath. They tried to take the camera. Tried to take the proof. I fought. I didn't mean. Kane cupped the side of her face gently. You survived. That's what matters. Her eyes brimmed, glistening with a storm of fear, pain, and relief. Then her body sagged completely, trusting him with her weight. Kane reacted instantly. He lifted her in his arms carefully, as though she were something fragile, something precious. Her head rested against his chest, her fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt, weakly unconsciously. Marcus swallowed hard at the sight. A father watching a stranger hold his daughter, yet knowing instinctively that she was safer in his arms than in anyone else's. "Let's move," Marcus said, voice firm again, quietly. They took the side route along the lower pier, avoiding the main walkway above. The storm clouds pressed low, dark and heavy, casting long shadows across the water. The boards groaned softly beneath their boots. Every sound seemed magnified, every creak, every gust, every distant call of a gull. Kane led the way, carrying Tessa as though he'd done it 1,000 times. Halfway up the embankment, she stirred once more. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Kane, you came." Kane's chest tightened. "Of course I did." Her lips trembled, not quite a smile, but something close. Something fighting its way past fear. She whispered one more thing so soft he almost didn't hear it. "I knew you would." Those words lit something deep inside him, something that felt like purpose and responsibility. When they reached the SUV, Kira opened the back door. Kane laid Tessa down gently across the seat, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. She didn't let go of his hand until the last possible moment. Marcus stood nearby, shoulders, squared eyes burning with emotion he refused to let break. For years he had commanded fleets, and men issued orders that shaped missions and saved lives. But today he watched someone else save the most important life of all. "Mr. Miller," Marcus said quietly. Kane straightened. "There will come a day," Marcus continued, "when I repay what you've done for my daughter today. But until then, thank you." Kane gave a short nod. Words felt unnecessary. Kira climbed in beside Tessa, checking her vitals, without drawing attention to Marcus's shaking hands. Kane moved to the passenger side, but Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "Ride with her," Marcus said. "She'll need a familiar presence when she wakes." The Admiral stepped aside. Kane hesitated only a breath before obeying. The ride back to base felt surreal, rain streaking against the windows, the hum of the engine deep and steady, Tessa's faint breathing, the only sound Kane cared about. She lay with her head slightly turned toward him, her features softening now that she was no longer fighting for her life. Kane watched her, not with romantic longing, but with the fierce tenderness of someone who understood the cost of survival, who recognized the weight she carried. He whispered softly, more to himself than to her, "You don't have to fight alone anymore." As they neared the base gates, a flicker of movement in the distance caught Kane's eye, a figure disappearing behind the cliffs. Watching, waiting. Kane's jaw tightened. The enemy wasn't gone. They weren't finished. And Tessa wasn't safe yet. But one thing had changed. She wasn't running into the dark anymore. She was running toward someone. Toward him. And Kane wasn't going to let anyone take her away again. Not while he was breathing. The medical wing of Naval Command didn't sleep. Even at midnight, lights glowed softly behind frosted glass, and the low hum of machines blended with the steady footsteps of nurses walking their rounds. But inside Tessa Ralt's recovery room, everything felt still, suspended, as if the world held its breath for her. Kane sat beside the bed, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely. He hadn't moved much in the past several hours. He barely noticed the stiffness in his back, or the cool air shifting each time the door opened. His focus stayed on the young woman resting beneath the thin military blanket. Her breathing had stabilized. Her color slowly returned. Strands of her hair lay gently across her cheek, and every now and then, her fingers twitched, as though her body still remembered running even in sleep. Marcus Ralt stood by the window, his silhouette tall and unmoving. The Admiral's uniform looked heavier than usual, weighed down not by rank, but by the aching vulnerability of a father who had nearly lost his child. "Mr. Miller," Marcus said quietly. Kane looked up. "Take a rest. The doctors say she'll be asleep for a while." Kane shook his head. "I'm fine." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You care for her?" It wasn't a question. Kane's voice was soft. "I care that she's alive." Marcus nodded, not pushing further. "She trusts you. I don't know why, but she does." Kane exhaled. "Maybe because I didn't ask anything from her. Or maybe Marcus said because you saw her pain and didn't turn away." Kane didn't respond. He didn't have to. Marcus walked over, placing a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that carried gratitude far beyond words. "She'll want to see you when she wakes," Marcus added. "Stay." Tessa woke near dawn. Not abruptly, not in terror, but gently, as if surfacing from deep water. Her lashes fluttered. Kane leaned forward immediately, his voice warm and steady. "Tessa, hey, you're okay." Her eyes opened slowly. Confusion flickered, then recognition. When she saw him, her breath steadied, and her shoulders relaxed for the first time since he had met her. "You," she whispered. Kane smiled. "Yeah, I'm here." Her gaze drifted to her surroundings. "How?" "Long. A few hours," he said. "You've been sleeping." She swallowed. "Did they find the camera?" Kane reached to the bedside table and showed her the cloth-wrapped object she had carried like a shield. "Safe. And untouched." Tessa let out a trembling breath. Tears slipped quietly from the corners of her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't understand. That camera, it holds proof. Names. Locations. Everything they tried to hide. And you held on to it," Kane said gently, "even when you were falling apart." She managed a faint, sad smile. "I didn't hold on to it. Fear did." He shook his head. "Courage did." Before she could respond, the door opened. Marcus entered the room, no uniform, now just a simple shirt and slacks. A father, not a fleet admiral. The moment he saw her awake, relief washed over him in a wave so strong he had to grip the railing to steady himself. "Tess!" Marcus's voice cracked. Tessa blinked slowly. "Dad!" In 2 strides, he was at her side. He cupped her face with both hands, pressing his forehead against hers, as tears glimmered, but didn't fall. He had always been a man of control, but today, his daughter's pulse was the only thing that mattered. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. "I tried to come home," she said, voice breaking. "But I didn't know who to trust." Marcus nodded. "You trusted the right person." She looked toward Kane, eyes softening. "I did." The doctor entered a moment later, gently interrupting the reunion. "She needs rest. Quiet. And at least a week of recovery before we begin formal debriefing." Marcus nodded. "Of course." But before leaving, Tessa reached out and caught Kane's hand. "I need to tell you something," she murmured. Marcus stepped back respectfully, though he didn't leave. Tessa lifted a small envelope from beneath her pillow, one Kane hadn't noticed. She offered it to him with trembling fingers. "I wrote this before I collapsed," she said. "I didn't know if I'd make it back." Kane hesitated before opening it. Inside was a handwritten note. "You gave me my first meal after the darkest night of my life. Now I want to give your daughter her future. And beneath it, a document. Official. Signed. Transfer authorization for a large financial contribution into an education trust fund under the name Mila Miller. Kane stared at it, unable to speak. Tessa blinked back tears. I didn't know how else to thank you. You saved me. In a way no soldier or officer ever could. Tessa, Kane whispered, throat tight. This is too much. No, she said, voice firm despite her exhaustion. It's not enough. Marcus stepped forward. Tess, are you sure? She nodded. Mila deserves the chance I nearly lost. Kane had to look away for a moment. Emotion surged through him. Gratitude, disbelief, humility. No one had ever done something like this for him. For Mila. And then Marcus added softly, That isn't all. Kane turned. I want you, Marcus said, to join our civilian security support program. It's stable work, good benefits, hours that allow you to care for your daughter. And frankly, we need people like you. Kane blinked. Admiral, You protected my daughter, Marcus said simply. You didn't owe her anything. You didn't know her. But you stepped in anyway. Men like you are rare. Kira entered the doorway just in time to catch the last sentence. He's right, she said. We could use someone with your instincts. Kane looked from Marcus to Tessa to the letter in his hand. His whole life, every struggle, every sacrifice had been for Mila. And now, because of one act of kindness at a diner, everything was changing. Slowly he nodded. If it helps keep her safe, if it helps my daughter, then yes, I'll do it. Tessa exhaled, letting her tension melt. Good. Marcus placed a hand on Kane's shoulder. Welcome, Mr. Miller. As the room settled into a quiet warmth, Tessa drifted back into sleep, this time peaceful. Kane watched her, a sense of purpose blooming inside him he hadn't felt in years. He had stepped into her storm. And now she had stepped into his life in return. A gift beyond measure. The seasons shifted quietly along the coastline. Spring sunlight filtered gently through the tall windows of Miller's diner, warming the worn leather booths and casting soft, golden streaks across the floor. It had been months since Tessa Ralt was found beneath the pier, half-conscious, terrified, gripping her broken camera like a lifeline. Months since Kane carried her into the medical wing and refused to leave her side. And now, as the world settled into early summer, something else was changing. Healing, slow, deliberate, fragile had begun to take root. The diner looked exactly as Kane remembered. Cracked red vinyl, the hum of the old ceiling fan, the same checkered floor he had stood on the morning. Fate crossed his path with a struggling soldier. But today, Kane wasn't pacing with worry. He was sitting alone in his usual booth, nursing a warm cup of coffee with steady hands. The world around him moved in its slow coastal rhythm, fishermen stopping by for breakfast, retirees discussing ball games, Mary, the waitress, humming as she filled cups. He checked the door every now and then, but not with anxiety, with hope. Daddy, a familiar voice piped up beside him. Kane turned to see Mila sliding into the booth with a drawing in hand, markers still smudged on her fingers. She grinned the wide, innocent grin only 9-year-old girls could offer without effort. Look, she said proudly. It was a sketch of the three of them, Kane, Mila, and Tessa, standing on a beach with seagulls overhead and the ocean at their feet. Tessa's hair flowed in soft lines, and Mila had drawn a small heart floating above her head. Kane smiled gently. That's beautiful, sweetheart. You think she'll like it? Mila asked. Kane's smile softened even more. I think she'll love it. He tapped the paper, tracing the small but familiar details. Tessa's smile. Mina's hand holding hers, the way the waves curled around their feet. Mila studied the picture, then looked up at him with that earnest gaze she inherited from her mother. "Daddy, she's coming back today, right?" Kane nodded. "Yes, honey. Today." Mila kicked her legs beneath the table, unable to contain her excitement. "Do you think she'll stay long? Maybe she could come to my school, play next month," or before she could continue, the diner door opened. A soft chime rang through the air. Kane didn't inhale. He didn't exhale. For a moment, he simply existed in that suspended breath between past and present. Then he turned. There she was, Tessa Ralt, standing in the doorway with sunlight pouring behind her like a gentle halo. But this was not the trembling, terrified woman he found months ago. This Tessa stood with quiet strength in her posture and warmth in her eyes. Her hair was pulled back neatly, no longer tangled in fear. Her uniform top was replaced by a simple blue blouse, her shoulders no longer weighed down by trauma. She looked whole. And when her gaze found Kane's, she smiled. Not a hesitant smile, not a smile hiding pain, but a real one, soft, grateful, alive. Kane stood slowly, almost afraid to move too fast, as if she might vanish again, like a mist burned off by morning sun. Tessa crossed the room in steady steps. It felt like the longest and shortest walk of her life. Mila slid out of the booth, her excitement nearly bursting out of her. "Tessa!" she squealed. Tessa knelt down just in time for Mila to throw her arms around her neck. Tessa held her tightly, closing her eyes as emotion trembled through her. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered. "I missed you too." When she rose to her feet, Kane was standing right in front of her. Neither spoke at first. Words would have diminished the moment. Tessa exhaled softly. "Hi, Kane." His voice came out low. "Hi." She looked around the diner, then back at him. "Feels strange being here again." "Strange good?" Kane asked. She nodded. "Strange, right?" Mila tugged on Tessa's sleeve. "I drew you something." Tessa accepted the picture reverently, as if Mila had handed her something sacred. Her eyes glimmered when she saw the drawing. "It's us," Mila said proudly. "On the beach, together." Tessa swallowed, touched to the core. "It's beautiful, Mila." Kane stepped slightly closer. "How have you been?" She met his gaze honestly. "Healing. Slowly. Some days are harder. But I'm getting there." He nodded, understanding every unspoken word. Marcus and the Navy psychologists had given her space patience and long-term treatment. But healing wasn't just about medical reports or cleared evaluations. It was about reclaiming pieces of herself that fear had stolen. Now, standing in front of Kane, she felt something inside her settle. "Kira told me you finished training," she said softly. "The civilian security role." Kane chuckled lightly. "Still feels strange wearing a badge again." "You deserve it," Tessa replied. "You earned it." He hesitated, then asked, "How long are you staying?" Tessa's eyes softened. "As long as I want." "That long, huh?" She smiled fully this time. "If you'll have me around." Mila gasped dramatically. "We will," Kane laughed, shaking his head. "Subtle, honey. Real subtle." But Tessa's expression grew tender as she looked at both of them. "I didn't come back for duty," she admitted, "or for debriefing. I came back because when I was lost, terrified, unsure if I'd make it, I kept remembering the way you looked at me, Kane." He stilled. "The way you didn't judge me, didn't push, didn't ask anything. You just stayed." Her voice trembled in the softest way. No one had done that for me in a very long time. Kane didn't speak immediately. The diner hummed around them, forks, clinking voices, murmuring coffee brewing, but the world had narrowed to this small bubble of light between the two of them. Finally, he said, "You ran to me, and I'm glad you did." Silence settled between them again, warm, gentle, full. Then Tessa slid onto the bench seat, her shoulder brushing against Kane's. Mila squeezed in beside them happily, as if this moment had always been meant to be. The three of them sat together in the small Booth family, not by blood, but by something deeper. Choice, trust, healing. Tessa looked out the window, watching sunlight cut through the clouds. "It feels like a new beginning," she whispered. Kane nodded. "It is." For all of them, the sun had not yet risen, but the sky was already turning a soft shade of gold, gentle warm, the kind of light that hinted at hope, long before it fully appeared. The coastline was quiet at this hour. Waves rolled in slow, steady rhythms. Gulls circled lazily overhead, and the morning breeze carried the scent of salt promise and something beautifully new. Kane Miller stood on the sand with a cup of coffee in hand, watching the horizon breathe awake. He had always loved this hour, when the world was half asleep, when life felt paused just long enough to hear your own heartbeat. Behind him, footsteps approached, soft, familiar. Tessa Ralt joined him, wrapping her arms around herself against the breeze. She wore a simple cream sweater instead of a uniform, her hair loose, her posture relaxed in a way Kane had never seen during those first, storm-soaked days. "Couldn't sleep?" Kane asked gently. Tessa smiled, small but steady. "Didn't want to miss this." He nodded toward the distant horizon. "It's worth staying up for." For a moment they just stood there, in comfortable silence, letting the world settle around them. Then Kane glanced at her. "You doing okay?" he asked. Tessa inhaled deeply, letting the ocean air fill her lungs. "I am," she said softly. "More than I ever thought I could be." Her gaze drifted to the water. "I used to watch sunrises overseas," Tessa continued. "Most days it meant another day of fighting, another day of pretending I wasn't falling apart." She paused. "But this," she looked at him, "this feels different, like I'm finally watching a sunrise that belongs to me." Kane felt something warm settle in his chest. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Tessa always understood his silences. Footsteps pattered behind them, lighter, quicker. "Daddy, Tessa. Wait for me." Mila came running across the sand, hair bouncing wildly, carrying 3 paper cups of hot cocoa. Kane smiled as she barreled toward them with all the joy of a child who saw the world in bright colors. "I brought drinks," she announced. Tessa knelt down and pressed a kiss to Mila's forehead. "You're the sweetest girl I know." Mila grinned proudly, then thrust a cup into Kane's hand. "Here, Daddy." He took it with a warm smile. "Thanks, honey." Mila handed the last cup to Tessa. "Yours has extra marshmallows," I asked the lady. Tessa's smile deepened. "That makes it perfect." The 3 of them turned toward the water again, Kane on the left, Tessa on the right, Mila standing between them holding both their hands. It felt natural. It felt right. It felt like a family forming in the most unexpected, beautiful way. The sun's first rays broke across the water. As the light rose, so did the quiet voice that had waited long enough. Kane, Tessa said gently, almost hesitantly. He turned toward her. "There's something I need to say." Kane braced himself, not out of fear, but out of a deep respect for the woman who had fought her way back from darkness. Tessa looked down briefly, gathering courage. When she lifted her gaze, it was steady, honest, vulnerable in the way only someone finally healing could be. "If you hadn't stopped me that morning in the diner," she began, "I don't know if I'd be standing here now." Kane's expression softened. "You gave me a place to breathe," she continued. "A moment to feel safe. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't judge me. You just stayed." Her voice trembled not with fear, but with emotion resurfacing, finally free. "And when I wanted to disappear," she whispered, "you were the one person I hoped would find me." Kane felt his throat tighten. Tessa. She reached for his hand. And now I want to stay, she said, her voice firm despite tears beginning to crest. Not because I'm broken, not because I need saving, but because you and Moila, you make me feel whole again. Kane didn't speak immediately. He turned toward the sunrise, letting the moment breathe. Then he took her hand, fully strong, steady, warm. Tessa, he said softly, you don't owe me anything. Not trust, not gratitude, not your future. He stepped closer. But if you want to stay, if you want a life that's quiet and real, then I want that too. Her breath caught. Moila squeezed their hands joyfully. Does this mean Tessa is going to stay with us forever? Tessa laughed softly, wiping the corner of her eye. If that's okay with you, sweetheart. Moila nodded vigorously. Yes. Daddy say yes, Kane chuckled, pulling Moila close with one arm as he held Tessa's hand with the other. I'd be a fool to say no, he said. Tessa leaned gently against him, letting her head rest against his shoulder. The three of them, broken in different ways, healed in unexpected ways, stood together as the sun rose higher, bathing them in warm light. The ocean shimmered, the gulls cried overhead, and the world felt full again. Behind them, Marcus Ralt approached from the dunes, watching quietly for several moments, before speaking. You three look good together, he said warmly. Tessa turned, smiling. Morning, Dad. Marcus nodded to Kane. Morning, Mr. Miller. To all of us, Kane replied. Marcus stepped closer, his gaze soft but proud. You brought her home. Both of you. And now, it's time for new beginnings. He placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. You deserve happiness, Tess. She nodded, tears shimmering. I found it. Marcus's attention shifted to Kane, evaluating, approving, grateful. Take care of each other. Kane gave a small, solemn nod. We will. Marcus smiled and walked a few paces down the shore, giving them space while still remaining a quiet guardian in the distance. As the sun climbed fully above the horizon, Tessa looked at the two people who had unknowingly become her anchors. Kane, she whispered. Yes, thank you. For choosing kindness. For choosing me. He brushed a stray hair from her cheek. It was never a choice. It was just right. They stood together, watching the ocean glow gold, a silent testament to the truth slowly unfolding between them. One act of kindness can change a life. Sometimes even two. Sometimes an entire family. And in that gentle sunrise, they stepped hand in hand into a future built not from duty or fear, but from hope, healing, and the quiet miracle of love found in the storm. Before you head out, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Our community comes from so many places, and your stories and experiences are a meaningful part of what makes this channel special. If this story touched your heart or gave you a moment of peace, please consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us continue creating uplifting healing stories for you. Stories about kindness, resilience, and the quiet heroes we meet in everyday life. Thank you truly for spending your time with us. Your presence here means more than you know. We hope to see you again in the next story.